Thanks for downloading the Beyond the Numbers podcast. Accounting technology advisory services are offered through the services firm Campbell Technology Advisors, LLC. Any information contained herein or provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Campbell Technology Advisors, LLC.
I can't stand living in email, spreadsheets, PDFs, disconnected approvals, and constant follow-up. The worst part is a lot of good accounting teams have been trained to think this pain is normal. And it's not normal. It's just common. Today, we're talking about AP automation, but not in the fluffy, polished brochure version way. I mean, the real version. The version where invoices disappear inside someone's inbox. The version where nobody knows who has to approve what. The version where month-end turns into a scavenger hunt with a general ledger attached to it. I'm Randy Kardas, CPA, and this is Beyond the Numbers. Today, I'm joined by Dylan Hume, Senior Channel Manager and past CPA, and Nico McEown, Business Development Manager, both members of the Quadient team. And we're going to break down what modern AP should actually look like, why integrations are no longer optional, why implementation quality matters more than the demo, and how Campbell and Quadient help companies move fast without losing confidence in the numbers. Because that's the standard now. Rapid implementations are the norm. Quadient and Campbell can deliver. Data accuracy is the norm. Quadient and Campbell can deliver best-in-class AP automation at a price that actually makes sense. Quadient and Campbell can deliver. So let's get into it. Dylan, thanks for joining me today. Before we jump into the weeds, give everybody a quick intro to who you are, what you do at Quadient, and what you're hearing right now from finance teams in the market.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Randy. Here at Quadient, I work closely with organizations that are trying to modernize their accounts payable process, reduce the manual work, and create more visibility and control inside finance. What we're hearing again and again is that teams are tired of piecing AP together across disconnected systems. They want efficiency, but also they want trust and they want automation without having to give up control.
That right there is the key. I mean, they want automation without giving up control. I feel like for years, finance people were sold this fantasy that software would make life easier. And then what they got was just one more system, one more login, one more workflow, and another mystery when something didn't sync. Mm-hmm. So let's start with the real pain. I mean, when you talk with controllers, CFOs, and AP managers, just accounting leaders, what are they really dealing with day to day?
Yeah, well, a lot of them are dealing with fragmentation, Randy. Invoices may come in through email, approvals happen somewhere else, payment activity is managed in another place, and then the ERP has to reflect everything correctly at the end. So teams spend, they spend a lot of time re-entering information, checking statuses, chasing those approvals for wherever those are, and then trying to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks.
Let's sit on that for a second, because people hear phrases like fragmented workflow and manual process, and they can tune out. Mm-hmm. I feel like this looks like somebody printed a PDF from an email. Maybe they forwarded it to another person who maybe approved it in a reply all, and then somebody else keyed it into the system while trying not to fat finger a vendor name or a GL code. Maybe the payment timing gets weird. Everybody starts asking the same question. Where is the invoice? I feel like that's just not AP. That's just like confusion. And good people end up looking inefficient because they're standing on a bad process. So when you think about the first big solve here, I guess it really starts with eliminating misfit software and just disconnected steps. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And I speak to that often with the customers we're working with. And one of the biggest improvements organization can make is moving to an end-to-end workflow instead of trying to force, separate tools to act like one solution for them. The right AP automation platform really should support the full AP process from requisition and purchase order through to invoice handling and the approvals and even expense management and payments. It should feel unified, visible, and accessible, Randy.
I love that. It should feel unified. I mean, that's just, I feel like that's a great word we just underestimate in software. It feels like a lot of finance leaders have been burned by software that technically checks a box in their functional requirements, but operationally, it creates more work after adoption. Maybe it says it handles AP, but half the workflow is still outside the system. It says it integrates, but nobody can tell you what actually syncs. It says it supports approvals, but the approval logic looks like it was built by a raccoon on caffeine. So let's show people what better actually looks like. Walk us through the first demo. Show us the overall Quadient AP environment and what it means to have a unified place to work instead of 5 places to babysit.
Absolutely. And what we're looking at here on Nico's screen is the Quadient AP environment. So there's multiple parts of the AP process here that live together in one place. Instead of bouncing between separate systems for expenses, invoices, the approvals across each module, and payments, users can now work within one connected platform. You can see distinct modules in the same environment, which helps users navigate the whole process clearly without losing that thread of what they're doing at any given time. We can also support entity setup. So if we go there, there's that ability as well as role-based access and flexible user permissions, which really helps the organization tailor access appropriately across teams. And one thing worth showing early is the expense module. A lot of organizations assume they need a totally separate solution for expense management, but here you can actually see how this fits into the broader AP ecosystem without creating another entirely disconnected workflow that they have to log into and work with another vendor for.
No, I love this because as you're showing the screen, I'm getting a sense of the breadth, the depth of the types of workflows and approvals actually that are probably possible with the various entities that are set up, the roles, the organizations, even the dimensions. You were actually just showing. I mean, it seems like this is going to handle so many more types of approval workflows that maybe a typical ERP or accounting system just can't handle through standard functionality. And I love that point because that's how software sprawl happens. I mean, somebody solves one pain point in isolation, then another, and then another. And before you know it, the accounting team is working inside a digital junk drawer. I mean, this is what I want people to understand. AP is not just invoice entry. AP is not just payments, and it's not just approval routing. It's a living workflow. I mean, the purchase orders, the invoices, the 3-way matching, employee expenses, like you just said. I mean, that's awesome. And the user permissions with the entity structure. I feel like it just all matters. And if your solution only solves one slice of the problem, yeah, congratulations, you bought a partial headache. Maybe now let's move on to the second pain point because this is where everybody starts laughing, the tired kind of laugh. Manual effort, manual invoice entry, manual approval management, status updates and follow-ups that seem to plague accounting teams. What are you seeing there?
It's still one of the biggest drains on finance teams. A huge amount of the AP time actually goes towards keying invoice data and tracking down those approvals, if not the vast majority. Even when teams are experienced and disciplined, that kind of process eats up capacity. Automation changes that by reducing the amount of manual entry and giving teams visibility into exactly where invoices are in the process. And that's huge.
And I want to say something blunt here too. I mean, your AP team does not need more hustle. It just needs a better system. It doesn't need different people. It needs a better system. Because what usually happens is leadership sees the pain and says, well, let's just tighten things up. Let's communicate better. Let's follow up faster. Let's create a checklist. I've heard that a lot. Let's have one more meeting too. No. The problem is not that your AP manager forgot how to send reminders. The problem is that the workflow was built to require reminders in the first place, or that the system doesn't even support reminders to begin with.
Yeah.
Let's get into that second demo. Show us how the invoice workflow reduces manual data entry, how the approval channels work, and how the system starts exposing bottlenecks instead of hiding them.
Yeah, for sure. Here in the invoice module that Nico is showing right now, you can actually see how invoice information is captured and how it moves into the workflow. The goal is substantially reducing the manual entry and standardizing the process so that teams are not constantly reworking the same steps. Now, Nico, can you actually talk through what you are showing right now in Quadient's invoice module for everyone?
Yes, will do. So in the invoice module, we have the new tab. So this is associated to the inbox of the solution. So in order to eliminate manual data entry, you want to have your invoices flow into the auto capture of the system. That can be scanned in if you receive paper copies, emailed in, or you can drag and drop. The invoice that we uploaded here together is example 123 from ABC Picture, and that first is going to populate in the new tab of the system. So this is where we've eliminated any manual data entry as the auto capture has taken place, and now the finance team can come in and review. The system captures at both the header as well as line detail level, so you can code your invoices to one line if you need to, or to multiple lines if you need to.
And Nico, this right here, this was all automatically captured AI or OCR behind the scenes, automatically pre-filling?
Exactly. All of that happened live here in seconds through a combination of OCR and AI that looks at the entire document, however many pages, all the line details, and fills in your information for you.
Love it.
Great. On top of the capture of the line details, this will also smart code based off of your coding history. So your coding dimensions, GL account, item, maybe use projects or classes, whatever fields or dimensions you need will be smart coded by the system.
Great. Yeah, and thanks, Nico. There's a lot more we could show here, such as the three-way match with receivings and purchase orders, but that's all things we can discover with whoever is interested in going a little deeper with us. I should also note, though, that we can also configure the approval channels based on business logic, such as transaction type, amount thresholds, or specific requirements that the customer might have. Really anything on an invoice that you're seeing here can make a rule around can be built into those channels. That means that more routine items can move quickly, with those sensitive or higher risk items being able to receive additional review from the team. And importantly, the system also gives visibility into where invoices are sitting, who needs to act, and where those delays are happening. It's important to note that it also manages all of those, follow-up activities for the team. So they're not using up, capital with their own team members to, bug them about those approvals. Those should, come daily to them in their inbox.
And that's the part that makes finance leaders breathe differently, because one of the most annoying things in AP, I think, is it's not just the delay, it's the invisible delay. Is the invoice sitting in limbo, or, who's holding it up? While three people assume someone else has it, it's really in Janie's lap.
Right.
Or maybe it's the end of the month and suddenly everyone wants to know why something wasn't posted, and the answer is buried in an email thread from 9 days ago. When the system exposes the bottleneck, now the conversation gets better immediately. And I love what you showed, because that just demonstrates it. You stop accusing people and start fixing workflow with the system that works for you. And that's a huge mindset shift. A good automation platform does not just move work, it reveals where work is breaking down.
Yeah.
I guess now let's turn to the thing finance leaders care about even more than workflow, and especially now with the change in technology that's out there, integrations and AI. Because integrations used to be treated like a bonus feature, and now they're a requirement. They're expected. if the AP platform doesn't connect well to the accounting system or our other systems for that fact, the value collapses fast. Talk about what's changed.
Yeah, well, you're right, Randy. The expectation has definitely changed. Organizations no longer want a generic connection or one-way data movement with limited visibility. They want purpose-built integrations that are controlled, transparent, and aligned with how the finance organization or team actually operates. That means understanding what data is syncing, what the source of truth is, and what controls exist, and how to troubleshoot any issues as they come up.
Yes, exactly. Old way, let's connect it and hope nobody touches anything. And the new way now, it's let's design it right, control it, validate it, make it support the finance function. That's where the market is now, and finance leaders are absolutely right to be skeptical too, because if you're introducing a third-party system into AP, you want answers to very specific questions. What's syncing, what's not syncing, what fields are governed in the ERP, what happens if something changes. Can I see what exported? Can I stop bad data before it spreads? Or, can I trace the issue without pulling 3 people into a Zoom call and, then pretend it's all fine because we can't really figure out what the root cause is.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do that. Let's show listeners what purpose-built integration actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get into it at a high level here, and we can walk through how the syncing and export works and what data is controlled where. So the core ERP master data, such as vendors, GL codes, important lists that are present for each organization we work with, or categories, remain governed within the ERP. So we're not changing those, we're just using them. That keeps the accounting system as the source of truth for the foundational records for each organization we work with. Within Quadient, users will work with that synced information in the AP workflow, and we can also show how invoice data creates the AP transaction activity needed for actually processing, and then while the core master data remains controlled within the ERP, like I mentioned. So this helps prevent users from introducing inconsistent records and supporting a more controlled workflow.
That's huge too, because one of the classic finance fears is really this: are we going to end up with 2 versions of the truth? Which one's more real? And that's a fair fear. It really is. But I guess the answer is not to avoid automation altogether, but the true answer is to implement automation correctly from the start.
Yeah.
The ERP stays the source of truth for core data. The AP platform handles the workflow, visibility, controls, and transaction process around that data. And that's a much healthier model. I love, because this solution, Quadient, it truly demonstrates that type of integration. Let's go a little deeper, because I guess it's not enough to say it integrates. Finance people want safeguards. Talk about audit visibility, control points, input controls, and how the user understands what is being integrated.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where thoughtful design matters. There should be a clear visibility into the sync activity, export, and the data that users are working with. Users should understand what is being integrated and what is not. There should also be control points and validation in the setup so that bad configuration choices do not create downstream issues later. Input controls on the setup screen help reduce errors up front, and stronger AP coverage allows platforms like Quadient to query more relevant information from the accounting system.
That's such an important evolution. I feel like for such a long time, integrations were basically duct tape with a logo on them. Now APIs are stronger. Now we've got the introduction of MCP, as another layer on top of the actual, core, solution. And systems just expose more data now than ever. And platforms can do a much better job validating the setup and protecting the workflow. I love that you were showing the integration status and really like an audit log in effect. That's something that users need to truly troubleshoot when things are going wrong or when they're validating when things are going right. And that matters too, because the real cost of a bad integration is not just the sync error. And I'm sure you could agree with that too. It's the downstream accounting damage, maybe duplicate payments. Now, ARs overstated or understated, miscoded invoices, more work downstream, users processing against stale records. I mean, this is finance wasting time figuring out what happened after cash already moved. And this is where I want to bring Campbell into the conversation, because this is not just software. This is implementation quality. At Campbell, we're not just turning software on and calling that a project. We help design the AP process, map the flow, validate the structure, and align the setup with best practices and think through how this lives inside the real accounting environment. Because the truth is, bad implementation can make good software look bad. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And to some extent, like, we have to work with the partners like Campbell and even the customers to make sure like GL codes are clean and it's not like the garbage in situation. And then on top of that, a strong implementation is what turns software capabilities into reliable outcomes. The best results happen when the technology and process work together. That is especially important in the AP situation, where configuration choices can impact accuracy, approval controls, and long-term usability at the end of the day.
Yeah, I always laugh a little when companies focus only on, the subscription price and ignore the implementation quality. It's like buying a high-end treadmill and then, assembling it with like a butter knife, trying to get it done. The process design is weak if the mapping is weak, if the governance is weak, and nobody's really thought through how the team actually works and is supposed to work on the software, you're going to feel that later. Let's talk about another finance fear that's very real, the go live, because no CFO wants to hear this sentence. We're live, but don't trust the first month. That's just not comforting. It's terrifying. So maybe talk to us about how Quadient and Campbell too help create confidence at go live, especially when there's legacy data involved and clients are just worried about whether the numbers will hold up.
Yeah, well, I used to be an auditor, and you want to make sure that you're confident in your own data, but also that you can trust it to the point where the auditors can trust it and you can back it up that way. So the go live confidence really comes from, doing the work up front, with our teams, clean setup, strong mapping, process validation, and thoughtful control design all play into that, play a role in that process as well. So when the implementation is handled carefully, organizations can migrate legacy data and move into a new process with confidence that the workflow will actually support the accounting function instead of disrupting it and making people have to do rework in different areas of the process.
I feel like that's exactly the standard too. Finance leaders do not want just a nice demo. They want confidence that the vendors are right, confidence that the coding is right, and that approvals are structured correctly. I mean, even confidence that historical context, historical data, it's preserved where needed, and that the ERP and AP platform are working together properly. I mean, we want to know that you're not about to spend the first 30 days after go live explaining weird variances to leadership. This is where being built by and run by CPAs, former CFOs, and controllers actually matters. We know what it feels like to carry the number. And when you carry the number, your tolerance for sloppy implementation gets real low, real fast. I want to show one more angle here around controls, especially around fraud prevention, duplicate payments, and respecting what is happening in the ERP. Because some finance leaders say, look, I don't want a third-party AP platform making decisions in a vacuum. I need this thing to know what is already happening in my accounting system. How does Quadient help there?
Yeah, well, that concern is exactly why bidirectional syncing and controlled data flow matter. So if something has already been marked as paid, for instance, in the ERP, the AP platform should be aware of that quickly so that users don't accidentally process it again. That's a big one. And the same goes for things like duplicate detection and other control scenarios where the timing of information matters. With like things like duplicates, you want to catch those before they happen, right? Instead of afterwards, because it's much harder to get money back than stop it from going out the door. The goal is to really maintain near to real-time awareness so that the workflow reflects what is actually true in the accounting environment.
And that's what modern finance teams need. I love real time. Not a workflow that lives in denial, not a workflow that pretends the ERP doesn't exist, not a workflow that says, well, hopefully everyone remembers to check manually. No. The system should help prevent stupid mistakes before they become expensive mistakes. That's the whole point. Now, Dylan, let's shift into payments and approval flexibility, because one of the signs of mature AP design is that not everything gets treated the same. A small routine transaction should not need the same approval gauntlet as something more sensitive.
Yeah, that flexibility is important. Different modules and different transaction types can have different approval structures. So the workflow, it can be efficient where speed makes sense, and more controlled where additional review is warranted. That is important because you're going to want to have that sort of flexibility. That allows organizations to balance efficiency with risk management instead of forcing one rigid process across everything in a certain department or whatnot, depending on the different workflows that this company that we're talking about wants to set up.
I love that too, because that's where people confuse control with bureaucracy. Good control is not making every payment equally painful. Good control is knowing where speed is fine and where scrutiny is necessary. That's grown-up finance. Now I want to move into scalability, because a lot of businesses are not just solving for today. They're solving for growth, more entities, acquisitions, new locations. Maybe they're moving from one ERP to another, and they're trying to do this without adding to headcount. Maybe they want to automate one area first and expand later. One of the biggest software mistakes I've seen companies make is buying something that only works in its current form. Then months or maybe a year down the line, the business changes, and now the integration collapses, the process collapses, and the functional requirements have changed. Show us how Quadient handles scale.
Yeah, well, this is another area where flexibility matters. Organizations can add entities, users, and invoice volume within our platform without having to abandon any of the workflow that they've already built out. We can also support different ERP relationships across entities, which is especially useful in situations like acquisitions or more complex environments. For example, if one entity is tied to an accounting system that they've been using, a legacy system of some sort, and another one is tied to a different ERP, the AP workflow can still remain consistent inside of Quadient and our environment. If the organization later migrates to a more advanced ERP, they do not have to go and lose their AP history within our solution. We can literally just plug into the new entity without having to start from scratch in that workflow layer. And they don't lose any of that historical data that they've been building out with a different ERP.
That's huge. I love the idea of having a platform that could truly grow. I mean, being connected, let's say, to QuickBooks for, many years, and now you're moving to something like a Sage Intacct, you can it sounds like you could deactivate the current integration and enable the new one, and now your data's syncing. Exactly. No loss of historical data. That's huge. I I feel like there's an ugly truth here too. A lot of companies do not actually outgrow their people first. They outgrow the process first. They buy another company, they add another entity, another user, accounting centralized, it's not outsourced anymore. They're changing systems, and they now layer on a new approval requirement, and suddenly the AP process that was barely hanging on when the company was simpler, now it becomes a full-time stress generator. So when I hear that you can have one entity on one ERP and another on a different ERP and still use Quadient, I mean, really maintaining a consistent AP workflow, I mean, that's the kind of future proofing accounting leaders should care about. And for the audience listening, this is something that exists today. This is the world a lot of growing businesses live in. They have a Sage Intacct entity over here, a QuickBooks entity over there, an acquired business using something else, different approval needs, different users, different timing. The wrong AP solution will get overwhelmed by that reality. The right one is built for it. Maybe you can show an example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to note that this is all in one pane of glass view you're looking at here. You're not logging in and out of different entities. You can view all the invoices across all entities, or just the one entity that you want to work within at that moment. So here we can show the different entities can exist in the same overall AP environment while maintaining the right ERP relationship underneath. That also allows teams to manage the AP more consistently, even when the accounting system landscape is, more varied than ideal outside of our solution. So we can also illustrate this by showing how historical AP data remains part of the environment, even if the organization moves to a different ERP over time. It might not show in this environment, but we can just let you know that, and that's going to help preserve continuity and reduce disruption during the broader system change that these customers are going to go through.
Yeah, it's such a practical benefit. Yeah, nobody wants the AP team to become collateral damage every time the organization makes a move. Now, I want to zoom out and hit something that I think many people listening will appreciate. There's this myth in accounting that fast implementation means sloppy implementation. That if you move quickly, accuracy must be compromised. That if go live happens fast, somebody must be cutting corners. I just don't buy it. I think slow confusion is not safer than fast clarity. I think a disciplined implementation can move quickly and still protect the number. I mean, would you agree? Or
Yeah, well, I would. Speed by itself is not the issue. The real question here is whether the implementation is structured, validated, and aligned with the business process. When you have a strong, design, the right controls in place, and an experienced team, moving quickly does not have to mean losing confidence at all.
that's the whole theme of this episode. I mean, rapid implementations are the norm. Data accuracy is the norm. Best in class AP software, Quadient, at a practical price point is the norm. And Quadient and Campbell can deliver that because this isn't just theory for us. This is accounting and technology meeting in the real world. And I want to talk directly to the listener for a second. If your AP process still depends on heroics, you do not have a stable process. If your month end requires detective work, you don't have visibility. If approvals disappear into inboxes, you don't have a workflow. If nobody can explain the integration, you don't have control. And if your team is spending their time manually doing what software should already be handling, you do not have an efficiency problem. I mean, you have a design problem, and that's fixable. And that's the great news here. So before we wrap, I want to ask one final question from the operator perspective. For the finance leader who knows their AP process is messy, but has been putting off change because they're worried it will be too disruptive, too expensive, or too hard to implement. What would you say to them?
Waiting usually costs more than improving. It's that opportunity cost that we're talking about here. The hidden cost of manual AP is just, it's not just labor, it's delays, missed visibility, approval friction that's going on in your current process, control weaknesses due to lack of access to information, and the inability to scale cleanly. When organizations take a thoughtful approach, they find that the transition is more manageable and more valuable than they ever expected it would be at the beginning of the process, because we have a platform that's built by accountants for accountants, and that comes out in the integration and implementation process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Waiting feels safe because it's familiar, but familiar pain is still pain. And I've seen this again and again. Companies normalize broken process because they've learned how to survive it. But surviving it is not the same thing as scaling it. It's not the same thing as trusting it. And it's not the same thing as leading with confidence. Modern AP can be faster, cleaner, more controlled, more visible, more scalable. And when you combine Quadient's AP automation platform with Campbell's accounting-led implementation, system design, and migration discipline, you get something finance teams actually need. It's not hype. It's not a software theater, and it's not one more tool that creates one more problem. You get a practical path forward built by people who understand accounting, controllership, CFO pain, and what it means to go live without losing trust in the numbers. So, if any part of this conversation sounded painfully familiar, here's your next move. Comment more or help for a free co-pilot session where Quadient and Campbell will help you think through your next system upgrade and redesign your AP process. No pressure, no fluff, just a smart working session with people who actually understand the mess and know how to fix it. And if you liked this conversation, stay tuned. Today we stayed locked in on AP. In a future session, we'll talk AR, accounts receivable, and what it looks like to collect cash faster without making your team miserable in the process. Dylan, Nico, thanks again for joining me today. This has been pretty cool.
Yeah, well, we love being here, and thanks for having us on your podcast, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes next. Right, Nico?
Yep. Thank you.
So join us next time where we go beyond the spreadsheets, beyond the chaos, and of course, beyond the numbers.
Thanks for downloading the Beyond the Numbers podcast. Accounting technology advisory services are offered through the services firm Campbell Technology Advisors, LLC. Any information contained herein or provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Campbell Technology Advisors, LLC.